Hello and welcome to a very special episode of Back to the Blockbuster because love is in the air. And
Love is in
it's
the
not
air, guys.
not between me and Owen. It's
Well, hey, there is some of that.
I mean, I can share him. It's fine.
There is some of that.
there is some love there. But no, we have we're doing a special Valentine's Day episode, and we're talking about romantic comedies. And this episode will drop a week from today. We're recording on Monday, so we thought it'd be great to have on Owen's girlfriend and one of my good friends.
We're so happy to have her on. She's been in the background listening to me record in the past, so it's good to have her on and her insights into the romantic comedies and romantic movies in general. And it's going to be perfect for our Valentine's Day episode. So can't wait for her to be a part of it.
The only movies I watch.
Yeah, so this was when we were talking about this, because we were always like, hey, we should have friends on. And Jeeny was like, I don't really know like a ton about certain movies, but like romantic comedies, like I can do.
My lane.
So like it's very much her lane, and Jeeny probably has some good choices for picks or some of her favorites and some that she doesn't like. But no, it should be fun. And this is going to be like a no news episode. So this is all talking about romantic comedies. What was interesting when I was doing like research for this, and we actually talked about this in person, when I was trying to like compile a list of good ones, there was a big issue about like, is this a romantic comedy or is this like a teen movie? Because like I would see like Clueless pop up a lot, and She's All That, and 10 Things I Hate About You. And like, we've talked about this before, like I consider them romantic comedies. Our buddy Matt was like, no, those are teen movies. But there is a wide range of them, basically. And I wanted to ask you guys first, what is it about the genre that you think you'd like? Because like I was looking, some people were online saying it's really about like wish fulfillment. That's why so many people like them, because it takes these really not absurd circumstances, but kind of maybe unrealistic circumstances. It makes you believe that these things can happen to you in real life. But I wanted to see if you guys feel the same way or why you guys enjoy watching them before we kind of get started.
I think for me, I've always said I'm not the biggest movie watcher, just because, work is stressful and life can be stressful. And sometimes when you watch these like scary movies or action filled movies, it brings you back to that like high anxiety, what's going to happen moment. And when I think about rom-coms, it's a way to escape, and you just get to watch. And obviously there's trouble and turbulence that happens along the way, but at the end of a rom-com, you always get that happy ending, or almost always get that happy ending. And you really can escape reality for an hour, 2 hours. I always joke with Owen, it's something that I can watch, but don't have to be fully invested in. If I look away for a second, I still know what's happening. And, it really allows me to turn my brain off and just be present in that moment, because I don't have to think deep about a storyline. I don't have to try to put pieces together. You kind of know the flow that's going to happen. And there's something to be said about watching and really being able to be fully present in that moment without having to think and be stressed about what's going to happen next.
Yeah, I mean, I like agree, but I also disagree on this fact that I think
it's already happening.
I think that it's like some of the most sort of like stressed out and anxious that I've been is by watching movies like Meet the Parents, or just seeing these awkward situations unfold and knowing that there's going to be this awkward tension, because it always follows the same kind of script where it's like, oh, boy is boy, girl is girl, and then go into a situation where there's some turbulent times. Oh, they're not together anymore. Oh, I'm going to make a final comeback at the end of the movie and say, I actually love you, and stuff like that. So there is kind of a script that they do follow, but that sort of turbulent like mode and part of that movie sometimes just get me to those cringe levels where I'm like, oh, come on. Like, why is there this moment where everything has to go wrong in order for it to go right? But I also think that some of the reasons that I like them so much is because it really just puts like all of these unsaid thoughts about love and relationships onto a screen, and they actually say it instead of kind of being like, oh, this is how I feel, and like having those very sometimes hard conversations with significant others or telling your friends about how their relationship is going. You could just be like, well, this is an exact moment from 10 Things I Hate About You. This is the exact situation that you're in. And now I don't have to really explain it. It's already been played out on screen. So I think that like that's kind of something that I like, is that it really shows untold and things that are hard to say on screen, so you can kind of follow along and see if that situation really relates to you.
Well, and on that note though, too, in any rom-com, anybody can find something to relate to. So when I'm watching action-filled movies, like I've never been a spy. I've never, been in a gun heist. Like, I can't relate to that. And not to say that you have to relate to a movie, there's something to be said for the whimsical thinking, but in any rom-com or any good rom-com, every single person has been in love. Every single person has been in unrequited love or heartbroken. And there's feelings and emotions and situations that every single person, no matter where you are in life, can relate to and really put themselves into that character and relate to that character.
Yeah, not all of us are Sylvester Stallone
and R.R. Schwarzenegger. Yeah, it's true. Actually, I really agree with what Jeeny just said there, because like I think every kind of like character type in those movies, like you either have been or you can relate to, or someone is. Like you might be the best friend who like secretly likes, or the girl who's your best friend, or like you might be the girl who feels like you never get the guy, and then like suddenly that guy is seeing you for the first time. It's like always like kind of like these big declarations of like either like you kind of have gone through it, or someone who's gone through it, or like there's something that's just very relatable about it. And like it is fluff, and like I know that's why some people don't like them, because they're like they think it gives you like unrealistic expectations. right really unreal. Yeah, but I mean there is something to be said about something that can make you kind of shut your brain off in a good way, where you're just kind of like you're going to be, for the most part, like happy at the end, unless there are certain romantic comedies where like maybe they don't end up together the way you want them to, but for the most part it's going to follow the same formula that you're like, yeah, they're fighting right now, but like 45 minutes from now they're going to end up together. Like you have that hope, and I think that's why people like them so much, because they know exactly what they're getting, and there's something to be said about that. Pretty much.
I think that one of the ones that comes right to mind when you say not always a happy ending, the one that jumps out to me is She's Just Not That Into You. And I watched that probably within the last year. It was one of the ones, I think we actually talked about it maybe like 2 or 3 weeks ago, where it's like they could have done so much with that cast, but I thought that the story came across really well, and just like the whole basically sort of come down, like Bradley Cooper's character hits rock bottom when he divorces Jennifer Connelly. His affair with Scarlett Johansson ends, and then that's kind of the end of his story. So like there's definitely some good things that come out of that movie, but that's one of those stories that kind of at the end of it I was sad for him, but he did it to himself. So it's like one of those things where it's like the decisions we make are going to affect a lot more people than just us. And sometimes it works out for the best, sometimes it doesn't. But that was one of the movies that stood out automatically when you mentioned that, Gaius.
Yeah, for sure. I also looked up too, because of course we have two guys, of course Jeannie's on as a girl, but like they were talking about men who watch romantic comedies, and that even though it's a genre that for the most part gets marketed towards women a lot, and there's the assumption that mostly women watch them, they were talking about how box office revenue from like the mid 90s into like almost the mid 2000s a little bit kind of shows that men were seeing them just as much as women. Now there's that whole argument like, maybe they're taking their dates.
How do they pull those demographics for ticket sales?
From box office reporting, basically. Like certain places will report like who you can like actually put in your information and say like I'm 18 and a male and live here, and like it's not 100% accurate because they can't get everyone, but that's how they mostly get it. But yeah, there was a lot of guys are watching them just as much as girls and enjoying them just as much as women. I think there's a whole thing that most guys don't want to admit to it, because because it tends to be a genre that is geared towards mostly women.
I mean, that's why they call it chick flicks.
I wonder how many of those guys that were there because they had to be there, like girlfriends.
Good question. Yeah,
like you did that.
Wives, sisters. Moms brought them there. Like I would love to see the data on how many chose to be there and how many had to be there.
But then it's also interesting because even if they did get dragged to that movie, it usually becomes a movie that they continue to watch later on. So like they do end up liking it, even if they did end up like, every single guy that I know has a little soft spot for at least one romantic comedy that they're like, listen, this is one of my favorite movies, but it's not something that I readily admit. But I think that's actually starting to change a little bit.
I mean, a perfect example is one of my favorite movies is Never Been Kissed. And we were on Netflix trying to figure out something to watch. And I was like, we have to watch this. And Owen was like, I absolutely do not want to watch this. But we watched it. And at the end, he was like invested. And I mean, I think that you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I will say
the hesitation.
It's just I know, right? Because like the whole point of the movie
It's
thinking
okay.
about it, like now, that movie could never be made because it's
Never.
basically about like a pedophile teacher who falls for a teenager in quotes,
Yeah.
and
He doesn't
like
act on it.
he doesn't act on it, but he was going to, like he was
Yeah.
about to do that.
Funny about that movie is that on one of the cliches is like characters falling in love with people they have no business falling in love with, and someone named
That's so true.
someone named Never Been Kissed. So they were like, yeah, it's cute and all, I guess, but he believes that that's his student at first.
Yeah.
Which
So
is
like,
problematic in today's time.
very problematic. But yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. There are some interesting kind of romantic comedy cliches that I wanted to point out and see if you agree with them. So BuzzFeed came up with some of these, and then I looked up some other ones online. But the first one that popped up was women being wildly transformed by a makeover. I guess that happens a lot in romantic comedies, especially, and it does happen in teen ones a lot too, where someone who is already attractive, who is just probably just wearing glasses and is like considered a nerd, they get made over by one of their friends or someone, and suddenly the guy who didn't pay attention to them the entire time is like, oh, she's beautiful.
Princess Diaries.
Yep.
It's like literally the whole point of that movie.
The You Belong With Me music video by Taylor
Yeah.
Swift is
True.
She's All That does that as well.
Mhm.
I think in Clueless, they make over Brittany Murphy's character in that way too. They were saying that's actually, it was interesting because they were saying that is a very unhealthy view for some women to have. Like, I'm not like good enough the way I am, and like you only notice me when I get like this like professional makeover by like my friends or.
And it demotes love down to pure physical attraction, which obviously we know is an important piece of it. But what I would hope and what I think will start to come out is, we continue on, is making over like intelligently, or maybe like a life makeover, like I got a new job and I feel confident, or I started working out for myself, or I figured out my finances in my 20s and now I feel confident and ready to take on the world. And I think that as we start to transition from traditional beauty standards and into more like being a boss bitch doesn't have to mean you're the hottest girl in the room, but it means that you like have your shit together and you're confident. I would hope that rom-coms start to transition away from just the physical beauty and start to look at women more as a whole, because I agree, like growing up watching Anne Hathaway be made over in Princess Diaries, I'm like, oh, so if I straighten my hair and take my glasses off, then all of a sudden the guy I want might want me too. And that's really hard to live up to, because we know Anne Hathaway is gorgeous with or without her curly hair or glasses.
I think that there's already a start to move away from that. I mean, the first one that I can think of is the Netflix original Always Be My Maybe. I mean, that even just puts the woman as they are high school fling, and then she becomes a very successful person. He kind of doesn't. And so it's more about their connection with each other rather than, oh, I'm like not attracted to you anymore because of what you do. It's like, well, we always had something and it just didn't end up working out. But I feel like that's a good example of a rom-com that can not be centered around a physical makeover. And I also think that it shows that romantic comedies are still successful, because when it came out, it was #1 on Netflix for like 4 weeks or something, just always #1, and everyone was referencing it. The Keanu Reeves cameo was amazing. So I mean, like just certain things like that where we can get away from that sort of typical romantic trope and still have a good movie out of it.
Yeah, it's weird too, because it is like a problematic thing that I'm surprised that never really got called out a lot sooner. Like it's like very like, I mean, like I don't remember it being so much an issue like in like the late 90s, early 2000s, when like a lot of these movies are being made. But it's I know some people call them out for it now, because of course everything's kind of getting rewatched and reevaluated in today's lens as being problematic, especially when it comes to stuff for women.
But they are still classics in and of itself. Like Princess Diaries will always be a great movie, but you're not going to show it to your young daughter and say, hey, this is how you become beautiful. You become a princess. Like, that's not really the sense of it. It's more just like a family fun thing. So I think it's all about the tone and the sort of, I guess, conversation you can have, especially if you're watching it with little kids, of why that's important or why that happens, rather than just kind of taking it for itself. But it's always going to be a good movie. It's just not necessarily the role that you want to portray, just about the conversation.
Exactly.
Well, and taking that idea, when we think about movies like The Proposal or other movies, they paint the women, the strong, confident boss women, as the shrew, the one who's alone. Like Sandra Bullock's character in The Proposal, she has to basically convince Ryan Reynolds to pretend to be her boyfriend when she goes, or when he brings her home, because she's too confident, too bossy, too this, too that. Because what they do unintentionally is paint the strong, intelligent, successful women as the ones who pick that over love, who aren't worthy of love, who haven't found love because they're too bossy. And I would hope and I would like to see them move away from that narrative, because what it unintentionally tells little girls is, if you're successful, you're gonna have a hard time finding love.
It kind of tells them that they can't have both, right? Like that's what it seems like. You can't be successful. Yeah, you can't be successful and also find love, and that isn't a lot of them actually.
Yeah, and then on the flip side, you could have the other double standard of the successful woman, but then in the same sense, they paint the guy as sort of a dumb, sex crazed, only cares about wanting to have sex and not who they're interested, like not being interested in their personality. And that's also something that I've seen a lot in just traditional sitcoms as well. That's just painting the picture of, oh, all guys care about is sex, and all they care about is this one thing. And I think that's also a little unhealthy as well.
Yeah, like if you're dating around, you must be promiscuous. You must be out there sleeping with all the women. When in our day and age, it's very normal and natural to date around. That's why we have Tinder and Bumble and Hinge.
Yeah, exactly. This was another cliche that I thought was interesting, because it says stalking being seen as a romantic gesture. And they cite
the movie You, or the TV show You,
and they also cite Love Actually, because the guy, the Keira Knightley subplot with like the guy who's in love with his best friend's like wife, when he's shooting their wedding and she has to go get the wedding video, and he's hesitant to show her because like he knows that he only like shot her. He only had the camera on her the entire time. And instead of being like freaked out like any other girl would have been, like what the hell were you doing? She like is like kind of like enamored by it, and it's like, oh, I thought you didn't like me, that's why you're so rude to me. And like she doesn't react how most women
freaked out. I mean, it shows love in an unhealthy term, like not the love that you should be vying for. That's like toxic love, not real pure love.
Well, then there's like the whole side of Twitter too that will say, oh, I would have let the guy from You kidnap me.
Oh, Joe Goldberg.
Like, I would have let that happen. It's like, no, you wouldn't.
Penn Badgley literally had to come out on Twitter and be like, stop. You guys are psychotic. Like, you don't want Joe Goldberg. Like, what is wrong with you people?
The same thing happened with Ted Bundy.
Yeah, Zac Efron played him. Yeah,
I thought it was interesting too.
Also, the real life Ted Bundy. People were in the courtroom being like
fawning over him.
Fawning over him.
He murdered a girl.
Yeah, everyone loves a bad boy.
I thought it was interesting too, because like everyone loves that like scene in Love Actually where he shows up with the signs at her door, and like I think it was BuzzFeed that pointed out, they're like, hey, it's shitty that he's doing that to his best friend. That's his best friend's like wife, and then she still sees it as a romantic gesture too. Like she's just like, oh, like you're the guy who like filmed me my entire wedding video with just me, and like it shouldn't be considered cute, but a lot of people love that scene. Actually, myself included, I think that scene is, in the context of like just watching that moment, is cool. But when you think about it and you're just like, oh yeah, that's not, there's something wrong.
They create it too. Like how many times have you seen like high schoolers in their little promposals and they have the signs, or you see like knockoff proposals? Like instead of being creeped out by it, people like emulate that.
Yeah. To be devil's advocate though, you wouldn't want to watch a movie of just like two people happily falling in love with nothing going wrong.
Yeah.
So it's like to like actually kind of put it in perspective, like I get it that these are situations where you would want to watch a movie about it because it's interesting, there's plot flow and direction to it. But like it really is just kind of creepy in the bare sense of it. But I guess just trying to watch a movie about two normal people just like meeting and being like, hey, I like you too, all right, let's get together, like that's just not a movie.
They're like we need conflict, we need more conflict.
Exactly.
Another one is when a girl has a guy best friend and she must be blind because he loves her, but she prefers some other doofus. So she prefers douchebag. Yeah, so like she prefers some other guy other than the guy who like clearly is in love with her.
What's that movie, My Best Friend's Girl?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, and that's another thing too. Like, do they portray that in a lot of movies where like there's clearly this guy or even the girl is like good for that person, but of course like that person just doesn't see it because they're like, oh, like you're my buddy and you've been like my buddy forever.
Mhm.
But I think it is funny when there is a situation like that in the movie and like the person they are dating isn't really a nice person all the time. He clearly is like a dick, or the girl is clearly a bitch. It's never like, I think the only time I've seen it where the girl wasn't a bitch was in My Best Friend's Wedding, where you're supposed to actually like Cameron Diaz, even though Julia
Mhm.
Roberts wants to break them up. Like
Mhm.
you never really say like, oh, like of course I want them to break them up because she's awful. Like, and that's like the only time I've ever seen it that way. But usually the other person is just clearly awful. And
Yeah, they want you to be rooting for the like best friend who's pining after the girl. But I think it would be a better story if like both guys are equally awesome. And now she has this choice of like, I have this guy, but I also have this other amazing guy. Like, why does it have to be like a terrible guy and an amazing guy?
right, it's true. Like it shouldn't be that way. Like I think it would actually make it better from like a story standpoint, as watching it as like a moviegoer, if like it was hard for her to choose or him to choose.
This
in
means
this
Yeah.
case.
war.
Like,
Yeah. Like
yeah,
when you
yeah,
feel for
that's a good
both
example.
of the guys, like you're like, wow, they're both amazing guys. Like, not like, wow, he's a douchebag. Why is she with him?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think another movie that makes me think of is, oh gosh, I can't remember the name of it, but it's the romantic comedy on, I think it might have been a Netflix original with Adam Devine and Alexander Daddario, where it's kind of like a
Oh, I forgot the name of it.
Groundhog Day meets romantic comedy.
Comedy.
But I really like that movie because it really has a good twist at the end. So spoilers, if mute this if you haven't
Just
seen it and you want to be surprised. But he realizes that the girl that he's been trying to get, like she has chosen a good guy that's right for her, and he's trying to win her over. But he realizes that the girl he's in love with is actually that girl's friend. So it is kind of like a difference between the guy trying to find or the girl stuck between two guys,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
the now it's the guy who's like, oh, I didn't even realize that this girl is actually the one who I want to be with.
Yeah, found the movie by the way. It's a Netflix original. It's called When We First Met. It's
When
Adam
we
Devine
first,
and
yeah, it's
yeah.
really good.
You're right. It usually is a girl picking between two guys. So I do think it's interesting that you
Mhm.
said that like sometimes there's like two girls and they have to pick because they don't really ever focus on like that male female friendship when there's two girls, like the girlfriend's best friend.
Mhm.
Right.
Like it's always from the guys overstepping their best friend's relationship, never really from the girl overstepping her best friend's relationship, which because I think that, girl code, they're like afraid to explore that narrative because that's so frowned down upon in real life,
Well,
Right.
bro code. I mean, they're both frowned upon.
I agree.
Yeah.
So when it comes to romantic comedies, do you prefer? I mean, I know there's always going to be like two leads that are like male and female, but do you prefer a romantic comedy where the woman is clearly like kind of like the star and she's driving the story, or do you like one that's led by a guy who's driving the story?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Hmm. Do you have an example of like two that you like that are
So I would say like I don't love them, but like something like I think Matthew McConaughey and Kate Hudson are like on equal footing in like How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days.
That's
Where
exactly
some people would say that like maybe he has a little bit more of the lead in that than her.
I would
But
have
like
said
it
she
is,
has the
yeah, I
more
would
lead.
argue the other way.
but it depends. Like yeah, but like usually I'm just trying to think of another one where like it's more focused on like the guy having to fall in love more than like the girl having to fall in love. And basically because it is a genre that is caters to women. So like
Mhm.
and like the example, like I thought the example you gave with the proposal was interesting because like that's not necessarily a positive like image of what you would want to see as a like
Right.
female lead, because like it gives the impression that like you know if you're successful and care about your job, that you're also like rigid and not able
Right.
to
You're
like
true. Yeah.
yeah. And like I always just kind of wonder when it comes to like the co-lead kind of like thing, like with something like Ryan Reynolds and her, or like Kate Hudson and Matthew McConaughey in movies they've done, like who is more of the pull for like people going to see it? Is it
Interesting.
I feel like my guess, and I mean, I actually really never thought about that question, but I feel like most women the pull is that other women because they can put themselves in that situation. But I think that there's a lot to say. You know, at the beginning, you said there are a lot of men that do like rom-coms and maybe they're not quick to admit it. But when you have the male as the lead and, you know, guys can kind of see their journey and their story in there, if that would be like, if we looked at the demographics, I wonder if that would skew more towards men liking the movie. I personally think that I'd rather watch the guy kind of hold the story because as a girl, I've experienced that. I know what it feels like, but it's really interesting to see the male perspective of, you know, like for example, Just Friends with Amy Smart and Ryan Reynolds. Like you feel bad for him, like, you know, like you're watching him like as a kid pine after him. And then it's kind of interesting because they kind of do a role reversal where then like she's kind of interested in him. And I think that's a good example of maybe both in one movie.
I can't stand that movie.
I love that movie.
He was shaking he was shaking his head the whole
of,
time you were talking.
That is
like,
the definition of
You heard that movie?
no, it's just anxiety after cringe after
it is a very cringe movie.
I literally skipped to the end
love that movie.
to just figure out what the end was. And then I was like, all right, I can finally turn this off.
But I think that's interesting because it takes the normal formula of a rom-com and flips it. Like he was the one, like we talked about at the beginning, how usually it's the woman that gets beautified and falls in love. And like at that story, like he was the one that really did the transformation, or the movie, the Netflix remake, He's All That instead of She's All That. Like they're watching the guy do the transformation and see how that changes things. And I think that's an interesting narrative to look at too, because it's really not, I mean, those are the only two movies I can think of where there's like that glow up.
Yeah, I agree with that actually.
I do think that the male lead is one of the reasons that like the question that you previously asked of like what the draw is. I mean, all of these like super famous heartthrobs that are now like dramatic actors. I mean, Matthew McConaughey and Bradley Cooper, and I mean, I guess Zac Efron's done some dramatic acting now. He's still kind of considered a pretty boy, but like all of them were romantic comedy actors to become famous. And so like in order to, they made money because women wanted to see them on the screen. So
it's a good
I think that like
draw.
That is like a very big draw for a lot of women to go see, but they do, like Jenny said, they want to see themselves in the position of the woman, and they can put themselves in their shoes. They can relate. Yeah, they can relate to that. But they also see the poster and they're like, Matthew McConaughey's dreamy. I want to go see that.
True. If you make the guy unattractive, then the whole like sex appeal goes away. And you're right. Like you want to fantasize that you're the female character and watching that male character. And if they're unattractive, like, you know, and just friends, like you don't have that. And you know, when I think of rom-coms, I think of like, it's the sex appeal that sells, you know, it's like the 90s pop music, like sex sells.
Right.
Either way,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, either way, if you put, I mean, if it's a romantic movie, women will want to go see it. I think that regardless of who they go to see it for, the male lead or the female lead, I think just the fact that it is a romantic movie, comedy, or whatever it is going to draw in those types of viewers.
True.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too because this kind of comes up with there's this Jennifer Lopez romantic comedy movie coming out this weekend called Marry Me.
Marry Me.
And every time I've seen the trailer in the theater, I just hear murmurs from people that are like, she would never date Owen Wilson. Like what? And like, so there's like that part of it that's like kind of like unrealistic.
That's part of the movie. Too. That's kind of what the theme of the movie is.
Yeah. Like he's a regular guy, and she like falls, like she eventually has to fall in love with him because like. I guess the basic plot of the story is that she's a pop star and her pop star boyfriend cheats on her, and they were supposed to like have their marriage proposal at the concert, and instead of like marrying him, she just chooses random Owen Wilson in the audience and says
he's holding a sign that says
yeah. And then of course there's all this like and then of course,
I just proved the marketing tactics.
Gaius, you just sold a ticket.
Date night.
But then there's a whole like, you know, of course he makes her realize that like she's a regular person and like reminds her of who she is, and like, you know, that happened in like Notting Hills. That's the same plot too, like a regular guy who meets like a celebrity and like they fall in love. That's like the ultimate wish.
Born the other way.
Yeah, that's the ultimate wish fulfillment. Like you're gonna like be just a regular dude in the crowd, and someone like Jennifer Lopez is gonna be like, Yeah, I want to marry you.
Right there.
But like I think A Star Is Born is a perfect example of a romantic drama, I guess you could say. Yeah, because it's just so sad at the end, but it's like probably one of the best ones that I've seen in a long time. And then I guess that's also my other question is like, just because there's a romantic aspect of it doesn't make it a romantic movie. And the first one that I thought of was Night and Day with Tom Cruise and Cameron Diaz. It's like, that's a romantic action movie, you know, like is that still considered like a romance, or is it more like
it has shades of like romance in it, right? So like I was thinking about this too, because I think sometimes with romantic comedies geared towards men, they get disguised as something else. Like something like Knocked Up is a romantic comedy, but it was also marketed as like a kind of like gross out raunch comedy too. Like, so yeah, at its heart it's a romantic comedy, but they sold it as something else to get like more guys to go see it, and it worked. It made a lot of money and successful. I think it's one of the better romantic comedies like I've seen, just because it's pretty realistic in its depiction of like, okay, they had this like one encounter.
Very realistic. And my favorite depiction is Paul Rudd and Leslie Mann. That they steal the show in that movie. Like their chemistry is unbelievable, and that's why they made This Is 40, right? But
yeah. Like just like that chemistry was really good. And This Is 40 is listed as a romantic comedy as well. It's depressing as all get out, but
or like Marley and Me, like but I think there's something to be said though, because like at the beginning, Gaius, you said that it's these like wishful thinking of like, this could be me one day, and like this is a fantasy. And I think there is something to be said about these rom-coms that don't give you that happy ending. Like Marley and Me, like you cry the whole time because you're watching. Like I remember when I was younger and I watched it, I was like, is this what life is going to be like? Like it's not always rainbows and butterflies, and things aren't always like amazing and happy, and that's real life. And but do you want to go to a movie and watch that and think about meeting a teenager, thinking about like, is this what 40 is going to be like?
Exactly.
I don't think that's who it was marketed towards, was teenagers.
No, not at all. Well, interesting about like Marley and Me, like I've never been more like deceived by like a film's like marketing campaign in my life. Like I
thought it was like a feel-good movie. No, I cried the whole time.
Yeah, I was like a romantic comedy with a dog, and I was like, this is gonna be so cute fun.
That's just cruel.
And then like the last 10 minutes or so, it's just like you're just watching that dog slowly die, and I was like, that's not fun. But also they did that to kind of deceive you, right? They just marketed it as like, oh, look, this cute like meet cute between this couple, and they have this dog, and that was the selling point. And then really they were like, we're gonna like break your hearts.
Yeah, by the end of the movie. Rip it out and stomp on it.
So that kind of brings up like sort of certain types of movies that use romance to hide their true nature. Like I'm thinking of like a raunchy romance, where like the movie Hall Pass, where it's technically a romantic movie, but they use it as like a cover to just do all this wild shit with Sudeikis and Owen Wilson. So it's like, do you think they use that as a sort of an excuse to bring people in, or was that the original concept of the movie? Because obviously like it's basically a late night raunchy movie that has like a happy ending with the couples at the end.
Yeah, I think because like American Pie falls in that category for me too.
I was
it's
literally thinking
like it's a raunchy like comedy, but there is like romance in it, and like all the couples don't like end up together like at the end, but like there is like that is at the heart of it too. Like it's teen romance, which is I think like, but it is kind of marketed and disguised as like something not so much like that.
The whole plot is them losing their virginities. Like that is literally
the whole plot,
the 2 hours that you're watching. But it is about like the romance of them like figuring it out and figuring out love and relationships at that coming of age time.
But when you go back and watch the commercials, I think the romance is what's disguised. I don't think it's it's marketed as a raunchy comedy, then they're just like at the end they're like, oh, but there is some love and light at the tunnel.
Right. And I think like with some guys, if you can kind of like trick them with like the raunch, like by the time the mushy stuff happens, they've already accepted it and they're like, all right, like
I'm already here.
I'm already here. I'm here for it. I wanted to ask, I have a list, and we were talking about like, it seems like there's a lot of usual suspects that appear in some of these movies. There is a list of top 10, and I guess it says a lot about like the the genre, because like there was a bunch of women. They only were 5 guys on the list. But I just thought it was interesting. Like BuzzFeed has as their best like romantic comedy actress, like number 10 is Cameron Diaz, which I thought she was like pretty low for.
I was gonna say that's
I would have said that's like her lane.
Yeah, that's her lane, because like think about like there's something about Mary is another good example of like a raunchy. It's a raunchy movie, but there also is
sex tape.
A hint of sex tape's another one. But she's been in like a ton of like like What Happens in Vegas and The Holiday. I was surprised that she was so low on the list.
Charlie's Angels is just a strictly
action.
That's not
And then Jennifer Lopez was number 9.
okay.
I thought she was kind of low, but then I realized that like she has done some decent ones, but then she's also done some like hot garbage ones.
Like what?
Right? Like really.
What was it, Gigolo or Gigi or what was it?
Geely is actually on a lot of people's lists. It's not. I don't think it's a romantic comedy. It is funny in parts. But that was a movie with her and Ben Affleck when they were like they met on that movie and then they started dating.
Right. Back in 2000.
Yeah, gobble. Yeah, I'll never forget the like it's turkey time, gobble.
Oh God.
Yeah, she was in like The Backup Plan, which I don't really like, and I'm not a fan of Maid in Manhattan. Some people are.
She's a hustler. She looked great there.
Yeah,
it's a romantic comedy.
No, but I had to give her honorable mention for that.
Yeah, but I'll give her one for I'll give her one for The Wedding Planner. If I'm going to give her one for like romantic comedy, I'll give her one for that.
I think she's really good in What to Expect When You're Expecting.
That movie, so I was gonna mention that one because I think Jennifer Lopez is actually pretty decent at even though she's this beyond famous superstar in real life, she's really good at playing regular people. And in that movie, I thought she did a really good job of like just playing like someone completely normal. Well, no, like sometimes you have to suspend your disbelief. Like, oh, like J-Lo's normal. Like she goes through the things that we go through.
It's hard because she's so beautiful that when you see her, you're like, you're not real. You're not
real.
A real person. That's not what you look like.
Number 8 was Katherine Heigl.
I mean, she kind of has dug her own grave in Hollywood next.
We're not even going to bring up her honorable mentions. We already talked about Knocked Up. We talked about Knocked Up.
That's it.
And she got her moment.
She got her moment, but she has done a lot of trash romantic comedies. I mean, The Ugly Truth, Killers. Some people like 27 Dresses.
What?
Apparently.
Wait, isn't Paul Rudd in 27 Dresses?
It's James Marsden. It's a guy, the main guy.
I liked him in that movie.
Yeah. Number 7 was Reese Witherspoon.
But she's kind of transitioned out of that into more of a Hello Sunshine brand.
Yeah, she really has.
Great.
What Sweet Home Alabama?
Yep, that's the main one.
Great movie.
That's the main one that they cite here. They also cite Legally Blonde, which I've never thought of as a romantic comedy. There is romance in it. She does end up with a guy.
That's romance.
But it's not really. Yeah, but it's not really. It's not that part of the movie.
I would call that comedy.
Yeah, and it's not the main focus of the movie.
They called it a romantic comedy because the girl is the lead. That's why. It was back in the day when a girl leading was not a strictly comedy. Yeah. It's a romantic comedy.
Yeah. I'll go in the top 5. Meg Ryan's at number 5 because Sleepless in Seattle. You've got Mail, When Harry Met Sally. Those are all classics. And she was like the romantic comedy queen for like a little bit. Number 4 is Sandra Bullock. I would have put her higher, but
let's hear the top 3 then.
Top 3 is Drew Barrymore was ahead of her.
Okay.
And they actually named it's because of The Wedding Singer, 50 First Dates, Fever Pitch, Never Been Kissed, and Music and Lyrics with Hugh Grant.
Fever Pitch was one they mentioned?
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't know.
That movie's horrible.
50 First Dates is good.
Yeah.
Like most of those are good. So I guess she does have like a good like block.
I like Adam Sandler in
small doses.
Small doses. But the thing that I think is funny about Adam Sandler, the thing that I find funny about Adam Sandler is he always casts the most gorgeous women to fall for him. And I'm just like, come on, man. Like, good for you because you're the lead, I guess. But like,
so who's it like? Jennifer.
Man.
He's on Jennifer Aniston, Kate Beckinsale,
Brooklyn Decker,
like,
the sports
Decker
model. Like,
he
Julia
always
Fox most recently
who's
in
the
Uncut Gems.
Who's the blonde actress? His love interest in Big Daddy, the beautiful blonde, the Hooters girl.
Oh crap! I'm blanking on her name, and I can see her face right now too.
Yeah,
I'll get back to you.
like,
I'll get back to you.
ew,
I love Big Daddy. What?
I made him watch it, and the whole
No,
time he was sitting there just in disgust.
There should be an age limit on how young kids should be for how many lines they get. That kid, I know.
That was the whole point of the movie.
Yeah,
but you fall in love with them because the relationship's
Alright,
so
gay.
yeah, they started acting on Zach and Cody. I'm cool with that, but before that, then just
I'll kick Owen out of the
Be-
apartment and we
be-
can watch
be a
it.
Plus
cute
Big
fan.
Daddy. Big Daddy is because I don't really like a lot of Adam Sandler movies either, and that's one of the ones I do.
That's like a classic, like I had a bad day and I just need something to like forget about and just watch
Yeah.
it.
So number
Next.
2 is Jennifer Aniston.
Yeah.
See, I don't think she should be ahead of Sandra Bullock, but because the movies that they're pointing out, like Along Came Polly, I guess some people, I don't love it. It's all right.
the switch.
The Switch, The Breakup.
Breakup.
Just go with it. Yeah,
Ross
I.
is-
She is in. He's just not that into you. She is one of the in
Yeah,
that ensemble
Ben
of
Affleck.
people. But I don't know. I just think
I
Sandra
actually
Bullock.
like their storyline a lot, and he's just
That's
not
that's
that
the only story. Like, 'cause I don't love that movie. I think there are parts of it that are good. Their storyline is my favorite in
I really like that.
that movie. Their storyline is my favorite in the movie. And then number 1 is Julia Roberts. Pretty Woman, Notting Hill, My Best Friend's Wedding, Runaway Bride. Like she was also, I guess, up there with Sandra Bullock as like in the 90s was pretty big romantic
I would
comedy.
have put her number 1, Sandra Bullock.
Yeah, that if I was my
Jennifer-
personal choice.
Yeah, I would put Jennifer Aniston lower just because she has been across a wide variety of genres.
Yeah.
Like a lot of these women that you named, when I think of them, I think of rom-com, but I don't necessarily put Jennifer Aniston solely in the rom-com box.
Yeah. I agree with that actually. So, but okay, you guess who's the number 1 man? Hugh
Uh,
Grant.
Oh, I was going to
he
say
got it
Bradley
right away.
Cooper or Matthew McConaughey.
So Matthew McConaughey was 2.
Okay.
Hugh Grant was Hugh Grant because he was like the king of being like charmingly befuddled in like all those movies, and he's
Yeah.
British, and like he's been in a lot of them.
British.
He's also in the Ultimate one. He's in Love Actually.
Yeah.
So like he
What about,
Jude Law.
what's oh my gosh. why am I
Colin
blanking?
Firth is on the list too.
Oh my gosh.
Firth. Okay.
Who was
Yeah.
the one? Oh my God, why am I blanking on his name? He died. He was dating Michelle.
Pfeiffer.
No, oh my gosh.
Pfeiffer.
Heath Ledger. Heath Ledger.
Oh, Michelle.
Brain fart.
Michelle Williams.
Oh, Heath Ledger.
I would have put him in there. I mean, he was in 10 Things I Hate
10
About
Things I
You.
Hate About You. Yeah, I guess like because he didn't do.
He played like the bad boy.
But he didn't do a bunch of them. I guess that's why he wouldn't be on it. But he
only
was
did
in
a
that.
few.
A Knight's Tale is not really a romantic comedy, I guess. But
I
like,
love that movie so much.
but yeah, he
you
actually
We gotta watch that.
Heath Ledger is actually on the list for one of the cliches, which is like grand gestures of love that no one else would do in real life, and like in 10 Things I Hate About You. 10 Things I Hate About You.
Okay, wait, I have a question about that. Growing up watching rom-coms and being really into movies, do you think that those grand gestures made unrealistic expectations for you guys when it came time to courting women? Like, did you feel like you had to do the whole like boombox over your head, big grand thing, or what do you think?
So
Well,
I'm gonna ask
yeah,
you
you
the
go.
same thing. Did you expect unrealistic expectations from guys
Yes.
because of those? That's what I'm saying.
But like, did
I
you
think-
feel that pressure after watching those movies? Or could
I
you
think-
separate that it was a movie?
I could separate it, but I also thought it would be cool to do something like that if I could like get away with it. Like if I could actually come up with something like that and like
You could pull it off.
and pull it off and like not look like an idiot, because
But
they
the
never
thing
look
that's
like
hard is-
they never look like idiots in it.
yeah, it's hard because all the things that you could think of are already done from a movie. So it's like
Right.
to come up with an original concept idea of a grand gesture is pretty tough because all the good ones have been taken by freaking Heath Ledger.
They have, and yeah,
so
and
people don't want us to speak poorly about you.
but yeah, it was that thing about grand gestures of love, and then like in teen romantic comedies, they said like suddenly like everyone in the high school like cares about like the outcome of like this person's relationship, and they
Oh yeah.
like so they point to like Love, Simon, which is like a romantic, it's not a really romantic comedy, but it involves like 2 guys, and like all of the kids are at this carnival, fully invested at the end to see if they like are going to make out, and it's every kid from their school that's just like,
Nobody
are they going
gives
to
a
do
fuck.
it? And
Nobody in real life actually cares.
I'm going to disagree with you. I taught high school for 4 or 5 years, and I don't know if it's a product of growing up with these movies, but I would say that my students are all insanely disgustingly invested in each other's relationship. Like a couple would break up and it would be like earth shattering for the whole day. And it would be like kids who were not even in the relationship crying about this relationship ending. Like,
Oh my gosh.
I would argue with social media now and, you know, growing up with those movies, I would argue that that's a real thing. At least in the students.
I mean, I guess now we would just switch over to like a group chat. Like, oh yeah, did you see what happened? Did you see what happened?
Or you have like Instagram where you can see like you know, like they're posting every day and all of a sudden they just stop. And everyone's like,
well, they broke up.
Investigation knows like, what happened there, you know?
But did we guess the number one guy?
Oh,
yeah, you got Hugh Grant. Hugh Grant was the number one guy.
Okay.
He was number Matthew, but you got the number 2 guy. Number 2 is Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah.
I do, before we like kind of talk about just a couple of romantic comedies that you guys kind of love to watch. There are a lot of actors who typically don't do these type of movies. And I was wondering if there was anyone that you could think of that, and I'll give you some examples just in case, but like Leonardo DiCaprio's never really done one. Unless you like that, and like someone like kind of like well, no, that's like a drama. Romeo and Juliet's a drama too.
Yeah, but Titanic is a drama about them falling in love and who will survive.
But he never, like, I can't see him playing like the ad exec that falls in love and it's like, it's a wacky, like, you know, meet cute.
You would never do it.
Right.
But I would call Titanic a romantic movie, maybe a romantic drama.
It's just a romance. Yeah, it's
just a romance. Yeah. But I thought of him right away. I guess like someone like Denzel Washington hasn't really done them. He's like, he did The Preacher's Wife a long time ago, but he doesn't really do them a lot.
It's hard to think about it because most of these actors have done it early in their careers.
It's like a launch pad.
It's a launch pad to become successful and do kind of what they want to do. Because it's kind of a cash grab for them. It's like if you're an attractive person, they're like, "Oh, I want to put you in this movie, read for it, and then make a nice buck."
Well, I'm not an actor. Maybe I'm wildly overgeneralizing and simplifying, but I would say the acting that goes into a rom-com romance comedy is not as intense as like a James Bond stunt flipping, green screen, you know, all the effects. Like I would say that that's a higher caliber level of acting than I'm getting my start and showing that I have good chemistry and can riff off of someone.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about that too, has Brad Pitt ever been in a rom-com?
I was trying to think about that, and like the only thing I can think of is
Mr. and
Mrs. Smith's like an action comedy, I guess. Like it's an action comedy.
Yes, when we watched that together, that was
that was so much fun. So I guess, is the Mexican a romantic comedy, the one with Julia Roberts? I don't think that counts really either. But I don't think he's really done them. And he seems like he'd be perfect for it.
He was too hot for rom-coms.
I think it's interesting.
What about like Angelina Jolie? I guess she's more on the drama side of things.
She is rarely. I don't think she's ever really done one. And you know what's funny?
I don't really see her as like a funny actress.
And I think the problem with her is that she looks. I mean, she's beautiful, but she like looks so hard. There's nothing like That's like casting like Michelle Rodriguez as a romantic lead. Like some people just
bitch face.
Right.
Yeah. And that's not to say that she can't do it. I mean, she's a great actress. I'm sure she can do it. But I don't think you look at her and think of like, oh, like she's gonna be like the romantic lead in something. Because
I don't look at her and think of comedy either. I look at her and think serious action.
Yeah. It's interesting what you said about like the acting in those movies not being like highly regarded. Because Matthew McConaughey ran into that problem where he starts in A Time to Kill, which is like a big dramatic movie. That was his like, even though he did like Dazed and Confused and stuff before that, A Time to Kill was like his big breakout. And everyone was like, oh, he's going to be like this big dramatic actor. And he did some dramas for a little bit, but then he did How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days and they made a lot of money. And then he just started doing them all in a row. And then he kind of lost a lot of respect from like his peers in the industry because they were like, you're not even trying anymore. Because they're not really hard. Like for a lot of people, they're not really hard.
They make a lot of money. They
And
usually don't cost as much as the action because you don't need all of that, the sound effects, the background effects, the stunt doubles. So you
yeah.
can stand to make a lot more money in the profit share.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then of course someone like him even tries to repeat it with like the same actress, like he does How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, that he does Fool's Gold with Kate Hudson as well, to kind of like try to recreate whatever that magic was.
Yeah.
Or Bradley Cooper and Jennifer Lawrence, like they were in all of those movies together because they have the chemistry. But for me as a viewer, when I keep watching the same two leads with different storylines, I can't separate the movie and the character. Like to me, I'm like to me, it all blends together, and it makes it so it doesn't feel believable, and it feels forced almost because you're trying to keep character development separate.
And almost it cheapens what they did before. So like Julia Roberts and Richard Gere did Pretty Woman, which is like a classic of the genre. And then they got together again and did Runaway Bride, and it not as good, not nearly as good. And it's just like the whole time you're watching it, you're just like, this wants to be Pretty Woman so bad, and it's just not. I don't know if people feel the same way about You've Got Mail and Sleepless in Seattle. I see like people like both, but
they're also very different.
You've Got Mail.
Yeah. But yeah, like I agree. Like I think once you start seeing them with the same people, like you're trying to recreate that magic that you had the first time, and like it's
and then it automatically makes me compare movie against movie.
Right.
Like automatically I'm like, well, which movie is better with the same people?
Instead of standing alone.
Right. Like you're automatically forcing a comparison that might not have or should not necessarily be there.
Right. And sometimes it can work twice. I think like Drew Barrymore and Adam Sandler, I mean, Wedding Singer and 50 First Dates are both good.
Right.
And I think they did a third movie together that I can't even think of the name because it was so bad. So it doesn't always work out that way. I do want to ask you guys, and then you can just give like one or two, but if there is a go-to romantic comedy that if you're feeling like I want to watch something like sweet and funny, like which one are you trying to pop in and watch at the end of the night?
Do you know mine?
Never Been Kissed.
Oops.
Striking one.
Fail.
What is it?
10 Things I Hate About You is like my favorite. You knew that. My favorite movie of all time. I could watch it 100 times in a row and just not get sick of it. I think the reason why it became my favorite movie is because it's based off of my favorite Shakespeare play, Taming of the Shrew. And I think it was just such a amazingly done adaptation of that play that drew, like if a teenager knew that it was based on Shakespeare, I don't think they would want to watch it. But if you just watch it as a standalone, it's just awesome. And the way that it kind of goes back to what we were saying though, like Julia Stiles, like her character was like this rigid, tough female. She didn't conform to the high school standards. And, he is the bad boy. And of course, like the rough exterior people have to get together, and the vapid, her little sister and the other guy, I don't know. I love it. It's my favorite. I think that it just is funny. It's relatable. The grand gesture is not that big. He just gets her guitar, which like in the grand, which is not like a small thing, but in the grand
marching band, the whole marching band.
As he's like singing and strutting down. That's true. That's true. But I think that it is overall pretty realistic. And if you think about it, like, I want to go out with this guy, so you bring your friend, so he has to bring a friend. I think that's something that we've all experienced and been through. And no matter who you are, you can relate to a little bit of every character. I think they were so intentional with that character development that even like the vapid popular kids, you can relate to their desire to be liked and to be wanted and to want to fit in. And then with Kat and her rigid exterior, like you can relate to someone who has walls up in his garden. And I just think that because of how they so intricately develop the characters, that there is no one character that any person can relate solely to.
Right. And you get two romances in that too. You get Heath Ledger and Julia Stiles, and you get Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Larissa Lennox. So there's two like romantic subplots in it. It also features a romantic comedy cliche with the bet, where it's like, oh, I'm gonna pay you this much money to do this. That
Yeah.
happens in She's All That.
She's
Where it's
All
like,
That.
yeah. But yeah, I love that movie too. I think it's really smart. On top of being a really good romantic comedy, it's just super funny. And but the romance part of it does work. Like Julia Stiles and Heath Ledger have like great chemistry in that movie.
Right. And I think they balance out really well the romance with like the comedy, like the teacher in there. It's just so funny. And like the guidance counselor, like as she writes her like raunchy romantic novel while she's working, like there's enough in there that like the guys can laugh, the girls can like swoon over the love. And it's something that everybody can watch and laugh and feel something at the same time.
Yep, I agree. All right, what
Yeah,
about you,
for sure. I'd probably put at the top Hitch.
Oh, I forgot about Hitch.
Like, yeah, that's probably like the one that if it's on and I'm scrolling through something and it's on, definitely gonna keep watching it. Just like it's the perfect amount of romance mixed with like a lot of dramatic irony, which I really like, and having like, I mean, Kevin James just unbelievable in that movie. And that is kind of two romances too. I mean, it's Kevin James with he likes and a lot of things where I really like the story where it's just be yourself mostly, and these tips that he's really telling these guys is just mostly like don't try so hard, don't try to like be someone that you're not. But then he ends up kind of realizing that the things that she liked about Kevin James is all the things that he was like absolutely not. So certain things work for certain people, and I think it just kind of comes in. There's a lot of laughs, but a lot of sweet moments, and it's funny and it's endearing.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna be mentored by someone in the game of love, it should be Will Smith, by the way. Definitely be Will
Yes,
Smith.
what's your favorite?
So mine, I mentioned it earlier. I've always loved My Best Friend's Wedding, only because it doesn't I like that it doesn't end in like the traditional way. Like I guess when they originally like shot they had like the original ending, they wanted Julia Roberts to end up with her best friend because it's Julia Roberts. So they were like, that's what people want to see. And so they screened it and they were like, no, like she's kind of a bitch, even though like we want her to be happy, but she can't be happy with him because we actually like Cameron Diaz too. So they did another ending where she meets a random guy at the wedding, and they're like, no, that doesn't work either because like we haven't met this guy the entire movie, and that feels like
who is he?
So all they did was like write an extra scene for the gay best friend to show up in. Like he shows up to the wedding and they dance together, and he's like, I got you, you're gonna be okay. And that was like the best ending for her character, basically. Mm-hmm. She wasn't gonna get the guy because she was like, she did some pretty heinous things throughout the movie to try to break them up. But yeah, I like it because it doesn't end the way you think it's going to end. I like it because it's not cliched in the fact where like you need to hate Cameron Diaz's character. Like you like her and you're kind of rooting for her too, but you kind of find yourself rooting for Julia Roberts. You're okay with like whoever might win. Like in the end of that. And like the chemistry between all the leads is like super good. Like Cameron Diaz is hilarious. And Julia Roberts like probably at the top of her game back then. And then Rupert Everett, he's only in a few scenes as her gay best friend, but he still's like every scene that he's in with her. Mm-hmm. And like, yeah, I just think I've always really loved it as one of my favorites. It's like very easy to watch. Like most of these movies are easy to watch.
My question for you is, we've talked all about these funny movies, these rom-com comedies, but do these romantic movies have to be funny? Like, do they have to be happy? Like, I think about certain movies that are in the like Titanic, like we said, like that's more of a drama. There's a movie that I watched on a plane with Hilary Swank called What We Had. And it is like I cried in the plane by myself for 2.5 hours. It's about, her mom and dad, and her mom has Alzheimer's and her dad refuses to put her in a nursing home, and, them just exploring the relationship of what they had and the promises they made when she was still lucid. And, I think we think of rom-coms as these, the comedy portion, but like these romantic movies as these happy movies. But what about the movies that aren't super happy and are, like the romances that really have that sad undertone or that realistic undertone, which we started to talk about, but then we went right back to that kind of comedy side. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's that movie with, Aaron Rodgers' fiance, and
the one where the cancer one
has cancer or something.
The Fault in Our Stars.
Fault in Our Stars.
Yeah.
And people flocked to go see that movie.
It made a lot of money. Yeah. The Vow with like Channing Tatum and Rachel McAdams. is another one that made a lot of money. That's more dramatic. I guess the ultimate like drama one is the Notebook for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that movie has all the like, it's not just romantic comedy cliches, it has all the romance cliches, like from like two people making out in the pouring rain, because that happens in a lot of these movies.
Yeah, or like the girl who comes from like a lot of money and the like average, you know, blue collar Ryan Gosling and falling in love, even though they're from different walks of life and worlds.
Yeah. I think as we end this, which I think is interesting, is romantic comedies aren't really what they used to be at the box office anymore. Like they don't really,
definitely not.
They don't make a lot of money anymore. And I think a lot of the reason, and I think because we named like with some of these movies, a lot of these romantic comedies had like these big leads that like were carrying the movie. Like you had your Julia Roberts and your Sandra Bullocks and your Matthew McConaughey's and your Hugh Grants. Like they are still famous and people still see their movies, but I guess the way people flock to those movies with them is different now. And there's no more like your name above the title doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to go rush out and see it. And I feel like they've kind of moved over to what, you know, you talked about, like Always Be My Maybe, which is like Netflix. And I watched one for work called I Want You Back. That's going to be on Amazon on Friday. That was really good.
I really want to see that.
It was really good, but I feel like they're all kind of going to streaming and they've kind of given up on like selling them in theaters anymore, which kind of sucks because they used to be so huge. But
and all those names that you named have kind of moved on from that stage of their career. Like, yes, they still do the rom-com, but now they're doing the romantic drama, the romantic action, you know, the romantic realism. And even though those big names are still doing it, they're doing it in a different way than what we grew up with.
Yeah, I think rom-coms are no longer the launch pad for stardom.
Yeah, I think it's kind of changed a lot. And it's kind of cool because like Sandra Bullock is doing one in March, kind of like a return to form for her with Channing Tatum, called The Lost City. It was originally going to be called The Lost City of D, but they thought that was too too on the nose. But it's kind of cool. Like, and they were talking about that with like in Rolling Stone and New York Times with Jennifer Lopez doing Marry Me. They were like, these are two actresses that are gambling on like a genre that used to be pretty big for them, and like, is it going to be a big test of like their star power if they can make these movies do well, especially in the time where like people are nervous about going to the movies still.
I think the launch pad now has shifted away from romantic comedies of that's going to launch your career to now it's, can you land a part in an HBO miniseries? Can you land a part in Stranger Things on Netflix? Like those are going to create services. Those are going to create like, but it's more like in a series rather than a movie. That's going to launch your career to basically, you can start out in a drama and continue to do dramatic acting. You don't have to kind of do these smaller, not smaller, but these sort of rom-com movies in order to become a huge star, where I guess it was in the 90s, that's kind of the way that people started to recognize you.
Well, the streaming services too have kind of changed that, because before you wanted to see a movie, you either got in your car and went to Blockbuster or you went to the movie theater. And now with Netflix and Hulu and Peacock and all of those services, Amazon, I can watch what could have been a movie, spread it out, and I can do it from my couch. And so these like mini series outside of cable have really, I think, shifted.
Like You.
Yeah, Like You is a great example of that. It really has shifted the way people consume. People want to binge. I want to sit here and watch 10 hours of this show uninterrupted versus cutting it down into a 2-hour movie in the theater.
That's so funny. I actually just saw a meme today and it said, if someone came up to you and said, "Oh, hey, do you want to watch a 10-hour movie?" You'd say, "Absolutely not. That's ridiculous." No. What if I split it up into 10 1-hour pieces? I'll watch it all tonight.
But I mean, that's because you can stop it wherever you want. You're not stopping it.
I'll watch it immediately.
So true. Well, I mean, I guess it kind of shows too that the genre is not entirely dead, because stuff like Always Be My Maybe and The Kissing Booth like did really well on Netflix.
Use all that on Netflix.
Yeah, like they all did really well. It's just like the audience has just moved over there, and like, you know, a lot of these actors and actresses who kind of made this genre big in like the 80s, 90s, and 2000s have either moved on or like, you know, it's not their genre anymore. And it's now like, I feel like it's more of like a younger genre now. It's more than anything. And which is why it's probably thriving on streaming and stuff like that.
Definitely.
But I'm glad it's not gone, because I think we still need them. I think like you need kind of like, you need like fluffy entertainment.
Good movie.
We desperately need them.
Like, I don't care if it's like, you say it's like not realistic, like whatever. It's a movie. Just shut like your brain off for 2 hours.
It doesn't have to be realistic.
It doesn't at all. And like, you know, let me have my moment where I want to believe that these two people can fall in love. for 2 hours.
Yeah.
And that maybe that could be me.
Feel good about life when I walk out of here. Let me feel hopeful.
Yeah. Instead of walking out being all depressed, I'm like, yeah, I'm so glad that
Yeah.
Owen Wilson got Jennifer Lopez. That's what I want.
Yeah.
I don't want that.
I could do it too.
We'll have to talk about that movie once it comes out.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, this has been fun, guys.
Yeah.
I'm really glad that we got to have Jeeny on because if we're gonna have like a Valentine's Day episode, it should be with our guys, gals. So
Let's
thank
go.
you for being on.
Glad
Thank you
to
for
be
being on. And yeah, you're actually gonna be back for another one, which is gonna be kind of exciting too. Kind of exciting. So talking about a totally different genre of filmmaking. It's a complete opposite.
Both of which I love.
Yeah.
But it will also be fun. And thank you again, Jeeny, for coming on. I appreciate
Thanks,
it.
guys, for having me on.
Yeah.
And Owen's gonna sign us off.
Yeah, guys. I love doing these sort of focused episodes where we can kind of just reel in and really focus on one sort of thing and take a genre and really dissect it and kind of talk about what we like, what we don't. It's always fun and gives us a little bit more to really think about and to talk about. And so I hope, and also kind of gives all you listeners an idea to just like, oh, this is an episode that's going to be a little different than something. So just want to say thank you to everyone who's listening out there. It always, like I said, it's one of my favorite things to do on Monday nights. And just, we're a playlist original. Thank you, playlist, for everything that you've done for us. And you can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts. Like I said last week, Apple continues to be the way that people are listening right now. But I like to listen on Spotify. And if you want to see Jenny's pretty face, you can go on YouTube as well. Gordon did not, my cat did not make an appearance.
He made a
this
little
time.
background.
His tail made a little.
I will tell you now that Gordon turned his ass up to romantic comedies. Just walked by and was like, nope, I'm down with love.
Yeah, he likes horror movies. Big slashers.
There he is.
He came to say hi.
There he is.
You all right? He's like, I hate love.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah. But yeah, as always, thank you guys so much. And this has been fun. Can't wait for the next one.
Thanks, everyone. See you next
Tell
week.
someone you love them, all right?
Yeah. Happy Valentine's Day.
Yes, I love you.
Love you.